Good evening, and welcome to Sleepy Historian. Tonight, as the world around you begins to quiet and your thoughts slowly loosen their grip on the day, you are invited to take a gentle journey backward through the centuries. Find a comfortable position, allow your breathing to settle into an easy rhythm, and let your imagination do only as much work as it wishes. There is nothing to solve, nowhere to hurry, and no need to remember every detail. You may listen closely, or you may drift in and out, following the story only as long as it feels pleasant. It will wait for you either way. If you enjoy these peaceful journeys into the quieter corners of history, consider taking a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and return whenever you need company for a restful evening or a long night's sleep. Every story is designed to unfold slowly, one small moment at a time, giving your mind somewhere gentle to wander while the day gradually fades away. Now, imagine that you have been told you are about to spend a day in a medieval market. You might picture cheerful crowds, colorful banners waving above busy streets, musicians filling the air with lively tunes, and merchants loudly competing for every passing customer. Many paintings and modern films encourage exactly that image, suggesting that market day was a grand celebration bursting with excitement from sunrise until sunset. The truth was often much quieter. A medieval market could certainly become crowded, noisy, and filled with unfamiliar smells. But beneath all of that activity lay something far more ordinary. Most of the people gathered there were not searching for adventure. They were trying to earn enough money to survive another week, purchase a sack of grain before supplies ran low, replace a broken tool that could not wait until next season, or sell a few carefully grown vegetables before they spoiled. Between each small transaction stretched long periods of standing, waiting, watching, and hoping that another customer might eventually wander past. For many people, market day was less like attending a festival, and more like spending an entire day quietly balancing opportunity against uncertainty. Hours passed with remarkable slowness. Feet became sore from standing on uneven ground. Fingers stiffened in cold weather. Warm afternoons turned into chilly evenings almost without anyone noticing. The greatest challenge was often not making a sale, but patiently waiting for the chance to make one. Tonight you will experience that long day not as a distant observer, but as though you are walking through it yourself. You begin before the first hint of daylight reaches the horizon. The roads are still dark, the fields damp with dew, and the air carries the cool silence that belongs only to the final hours of night. The town where the market will soon open is still sleeping, though faint threads of smoke already rise from a handful of chimneys where bakers have been awake for hours. Somewhere ahead, beyond the darkness, people are preparing for a day that may determine whether their families eat comfortably during the coming weeks. You are not a wealthy noble arriving on horseback with servants carrying your belongings. Neither are you an important official whose arrival causes heads to turn. You are simply one more ordinary traveler making your way toward the market with everyone else. That makes your experience much closer to what most medieval people actually knew. Your clothing is practical rather than impressive. Every layer serves a purpose. The rough wool resting against your shoulders holds the night's remaining chill at bay. Leather shoes, already marked by countless journeys over muddy roads, protect your feet as well as they can from stones hidden beneath the darkness. Nothing you wear has been chosen because it is fashionable. Everything has been repaired more than once. A careful stitch here, a patched sleeve there, a reinforced strap across one shoulder. New clothing is expensive. Old clothing is dependable. As you walk, you hear sounds before you recognize the people making them. A cart creaks somewhere behind you. Wooden wheels complain softly with every turn. An ox breathes heavily through its nose as it pulls its load forward without complaint. Ahead, another traveler clears his throat before continuing along the road. No one speaks very much. There will be plenty of conversation later. For now, everyone saves both warmth and energy. The road itself is uneven, shaped more by countless footsteps and wagon wheels than by careful planning. Rain from previous days has collected in shallow depressions, leaving puddles that reflect the faintest suggestion of stars overhead. You step around them when possible, and through them when necessary. knowing that clean boots are a luxury few people expect to keep for long. The countryside slowly reveals itself as your eyes adjust to the darkness. Low stone walls divide fields that seem endless in the half-light. Trees stand motionless, their branches barely moving in the gentle breeze. Somewhere far away an owl finishes its night's work while another day quietly prepares to begin. The first church bell rings across the valley. It is not loud enough to startle anyone. Instead, it rolls gently across the fields, reaching travelers one after another. The bell is less a command than a reminder. Time is passing. Morning is approaching. There is still some distance to walk before the market officially opens. You continue at an unhurried pace. Soon more people appear along the road, each carrying something different. One woman balances woven baskets across a wooden frame resting on her shoulders. An older man carefully guides two goats with a length of rope that has clearly been repaired many times. Another traveler pushes a small handcart filled with sacks tied tightly beneath a worn canvas covering. No one carries more than they believe they can manage for an entire day. There is comfort in these shared routines. Although everyone has different hopes for the market ahead, they all understand the same simple rhythm. Arrive early, find a place, wait patiently, trade honestly if possible, return home before darkness makes the journey dangerous. As the eastern sky slowly lightens from black to deep blue, the outline of the town finally begins to appear. Its walls are not enormous nor perfectly straight. They have grown gradually over generations, repaired whenever stones loosened or weather took its quiet toll. Towers rise above the rooftops, their silhouettes becoming clearer with every passing minute. Thin streams of smoke drift lazily upward from dozens of chimneys. Bakers have already lit their ovens. Brewers have begun another day's work. Somewhere inside the walls, stable hands are feeding horses while shopkeepers sweep yesterday's dust from wooden floors. The town is waking one household at a time. Long before customers begin arriving, work has already started. Outside the gate, small groups naturally gather while waiting for the entrance to open fully. Some sit upon overturned baskets. Others stretch tired legs after hours of walking. A few quietly unwrap simple breakfasts, perhaps coarse bread saved from yesterday, a small piece of hard cheese, or an apple carefully preserved through the previous season. Nobody eats quickly. Food is valuable enough to appreciate every bite. The smell of fresh bread gradually reaches you on the morning air. It is warm, comforting, and impossible to ignore. For a brief moment, it seems to promise that the day ahead may be generous. Yet everyone knows that generosity cannot be assumed. A merchant may return home with nearly everything still unsold. A farmer's vegetables may fetch lower prices than expected because another village arrived first with fresher produce. Rain might send customers home early. A broken wheel could delay an entire journey. Success often depends upon dozens of small circumstances beyond anyone's control. Perhaps that uncertainty is one of the most defining parts of medieval market life. Not constant hardship, not constant celebration, simply uncertainty. You begin to understand that patience is the most valuable thing anyone has brought with them this morning, more valuable than polished knives, more valuable than bolts of dyed cloth, even more valuable than silver coins tucked safely into leather purses. The day ahead cannot be hurried. It must unfold at its own steady pace. The gates finally open wider. One by one, carts begin rolling forward over worn stone. Hooves echo softly beneath the archway. Guards watch with practiced expressions, neither especially welcoming nor unfriendly. Their task is simply to observe, to notice unusual things without interrupting ordinary ones. You pass beneath the heavy gatehouse and into streets that are already quietly alive with preparation. Doors swing open. Wooden shutters fold back against stone walls. Someone sweeps yesterday's straw into neat piles. Water splashes from a bucket onto dusty ground before being brushed away with a bundle of twigs. Nothing feels rushed. Everything feels practiced. Each movement has likely been repeated hundreds of times by people who understand that a successful market depends less upon excitement than upon routine carried out faithfully. The streets ahead will soon become crowded enough that every step requires care. Voices will overlap. Prices will be negotiated, news will travel from village to village almost as quickly as merchants themselves. New friendships may begin. Old acquaintances will exchange familiar greetings. Children will stare curiously at goods they have never seen before. Dogs will wander hopefully beneath tables in search of fallen scraps. But for these few remaining moments, before the market reaches its busiest hours, there is a rare feeling of calm. You have arrived early enough to witness the town taking its first slow breath before the long day begins. And as the pale morning light spreads gently across the rooftops, you quietly take your place among the countless ordinary people whose patient work kept medieval life moving forward. One market day at a time, the road behind you gradually disappears as more travelers enter through the town gate, each becoming another small thread woven into the slow fabric of market day. Outside the walls, the countryside remains quiet beneath the pale light of early morning. Inside, however, the town is awakening with remarkable patience. Nothing happens all at once. Every door opens at its own pace. Every worker begins when long habit tells them it is time. The market has not yet truly begun, but its arrival can already be felt in hundreds of ordinary movements. You walk carefully over worn cobblestones polished smooth by generations of feet, carts, and horses. Some stones sit slightly higher than others, forcing you to pay attention to every step. Overnight moisture has settled across their surfaces, making them cool beneath your boots. A narrow stream runs beside the street, carrying yesterday's rainwater along with bits of straw and leaves that escaped the evening's sweeping. The buildings rise closely together, leaning ever so slightly toward one another as though sharing secrets gathered over centuries. Their upper stories stretch above the narrow street, reducing the amount of morning light that reaches the ground. Wooden beams frame whitewashed walls marked by countless seasons of wind and rain. Here and there, repairs reveal themselves through newer timber standing beside much older wood, evidence that nothing is discarded while it can still serve another year. A baker has already placed fresh loaves upon a wooden shelf outside his doorway. Their crusts are dark and uneven, their shapes slightly different from one another, because each has been formed by hand. The warmth drifting from the oven escapes into the cool air, carrying with it the comforting scent of grain that has become bread through careful work rather than hurried machinery. People passing by notice the smell, but few stop immediately. Most have other tasks that must come first. There will be time to eat when stalls have been assembled and goods arranged. Hunger is familiar enough that it can wait a little longer. You continue toward the marketplace itself, guided more by the growing movement of people than by signs. Medieval towns rarely needed many directions on market day. Nearly everyone was walking toward the same destination. As the streets widen, more merchants appear. One man balances several folded tables across his shoulder, their wooden legs tied neatly together with rope. Another carefully carries bundles of dyed cloth wrapped against the morning damp. A woman guides a small donkey loaded with baskets covered by linen cloths, protecting vegetables gathered only yesterday afternoon. Two brothers pull a hand cart filled with earthenware bowls, cushioned in straw to prevent them from knocking against one another. Nobody seems hurried. They have learned that rushing often creates more problems than it solves. A dropped basket may crush fragile eggs. A broken pottery jar cannot easily be replaced. A frightened animal may refuse to move for half an hour after a single careless moment. Patience, once again, quietly proves itself more valuable than speed. You finally reach the edge of the market square. Without customers filling it, the open space appears surprisingly large. The broad square is bordered by permanent shops, workshops, and the town hall, while the center remains mostly empty except for rows of wooden frames where temporary stalls will soon stand. At first glance, it almost seems difficult to imagine that within only a few hours this peaceful place will become the busiest part of the entire town. Workers spread across the square like careful ants, each already knowing exactly where to go. A butcher unloads thick wooden blocks that will support his chopping table. Nearby, a cloth merchant unfolds heavy canvas to create shade once the sun climbs higher. Basket makers stack their work in neat towers, each basket fitting inside another, until they resemble woven columns. A cooper rolls empty barrels into position with slow, practiced movements, stopping each one with his boot before it gathers too much speed. You pause for a moment simply to watch. There's something deeply calming about observing people who have repeated the same routine hundreds of times. No one needs lengthy instructions. No one debates where things belong. Each task follows naturally from the last, shaped by memory rather than conversation. Some stalls require only a few minutes to prepare. Others demand much longer. Heavy beams must be lifted into place. Canvas roofs stretched tightly overhead. Shelves adjusted until they sit level despite the uneven ground beneath them. Boxes opened carefully to reveal their contents. Every object has its proper position, because finding it quickly later may mean serving another customer before they wander elsewhere. Nearby, an elderly merchant unties bundles of herbs collected from surrounding hillsides. As he separates each small bunch, the air gradually fills with gentle fragrances of mint, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Their scents mingle with fresh bread, damp wood, horse leather, and wood smoke until the marketplace develops an identity entirely its own. You breathe slowly. No single smell dominates for long. Instead, each arrives softly before blending into another, creating an atmosphere that countless medieval people would have recognized immediately, without needing to see the market itself. Across the square, several town officials begin their own preparations. They carry official measuring rods, carefully balanced scales, and standard weights made from iron. These simple objects represent something surprisingly important. Buyers must believe that grain is measured honestly. Cloth must truly be as long as the merchant claims. A pound of butter should weigh the same whether purchased today or next month. Trust begins long before the first coin changes hands. An inspector stops beside one stall where a merchant has already arranged several balance scales. Without accusation or anger, the official quietly compares them against the town's approved standards. Everything appears satisfactory. A brief nod follows, and both men continue their work without another word. Such inspections are ordinary. They protect both honest merchants and cautious customers. Without them, suspicion would spread much faster than business. As more sellers arrive, the quiet square slowly transforms. Empty spaces shrink. Carts line the edges before being led away to nearby yards. Animals are watered. Bundles become displays. Crates become tables. Simple wooden poles become sturdy stalls. The entire marketplace changes not through grand construction, but through hundreds of small actions performed together. The morning sun finally climbs high enough to reach over the rooftops, sending narrow bands of golden light across the cobblestones. Dust floating through the air becomes briefly visible before disappearing again. Tiny droplets of dew resting on wooden barrels catch the light for only a moment before warming into nothing. A flock of pigeons circles overhead, landing confidently once they realize people have begun unpacking food. They hop cautiously across the square, already searching for crumbs that have not yet fallen. You notice that conversations remain surprisingly quiet. Most people speak only when necessary. Questions are simple. Could you lift this side? Pass the rope. Set it there. We arrived before sunrise. The day still holds many hours ahead. Voices are saved just as carefully as energy. Standing near the center of the square, you begin to appreciate how much invisible work must happen before a single customer can make a purchase. Later, visitors will remember buying bread, cloth, tools, or spices. Few will think about the long preparation that made those moments possible. Even the smallest stall requires effort. Tables must be steady. Goods must be protected from weather. Prices must remain in memory. Coins must be stored safely. Food must remain clean. Nothing simply appears. Everything has been carried, lifted, arranged, checked, and prepared by hands already beginning to tire before the official opening of the market. You shift your weight from one foot to the other. Already, after the morning's walk, your legs remind you that much of this day will be spent standing rather than moving. There will be little opportunity to sit comfortably. Medieval commerce depends less upon constant activity than upon quiet endurance. The square grows fuller. More carts arrive, more goods appear, yet there is still no feeling of chaos. Instead, the entire market resembles a great clock whose many parts slowly move toward the same appointed hour. Soon the church bell will signal that buying and selling may begin in earnest. Customers waiting beyond the nearby streets will gradually flow into the square. Coins will pass from hand to hand. Conversations will lengthen. Children will stare with wide eyes at unfamiliar objects. Animals will add their own voices to the growing soundscape. But for now, these final moments belong only to preparation. The marketplace remains suspended between silence and activity, between empty space and crowded streets, between expectation and reality. You find yourself grateful to have arrived early enough to witness this hidden side of medieval life. Most people remember the excitement of the market itself. Far fewer remember the peaceful hour before it began, when the square belonged only to workers quietly building the day, one careful task at a time. By the time the sun has climbed a little higher, the market square no longer feels empty, yet it is still waiting for something. The stalls stand ready. Goods have been unpacked with patient hands. Merchants have arranged their wares as neatly as uneven tables and rough timber will allow. Still there is a pause before the true beginning, a quiet interval that belongs only to those who arrive early enough to notice it. You wander slowly between the rows of stalls, careful not to disturb anyone at work. From a distance, each merchant appears busy with different tasks, but when you watch closely, many are doing remarkably similar things. They straighten folded cloth for the third time. They move baskets a few inches to the left before deciding they looked better where they had been originally. They count their coins, tuck them away, then count them again. They brush dust from a table that has gathered almost none, since it was cleaned only moments earlier. Waiting has already begun. A woman selling eggs examines each one beneath the growing morning light. She turns them gently in her hands, searching for even the smallest crack that might have appeared during the journey. One damaged egg could stain several others before the day is over. Better to discover such things now than later, when a disappointed customer is standing nearby. Across the square, a cooper rests beside his barrels for a few quiet moments. He has spent much of the morning rolling them across uneven streets, guiding them carefully over every loose stone. Now he leans against one of the finished casks, stretching tired shoulders while watching the marketplace continue to assemble itself around him. You begin to notice that many people steal these small moments of rest whenever they appear. No one knows exactly how demanding the coming hours will become. Energy saved now may prove useful later. The butcher sharpens his knives with long, unhurried strokes. The familiar scraping sound repeats again and again, never hurried, never careless. Beside him hangs a thick wooden board worn smooth by years of use. Every cut upon its surface tells a quiet story of ordinary work repeated across countless market days. Nearby, a fish seller lifts damp cloths covering baskets packed with fresh river fish caught before dawn. Cool air escapes as the coverings are folded back. The fish glisten briefly beneath the morning light, before fresh herbs are arranged around them, helping to keep insects away for as long as possible. Not every merchant has brought food. One elderly man specializes in simple wooden spoons. His entire stall consists of little more than a table covered with dozens of nearly identical pieces. At first glance they seem ordinary enough that few people might stop to admire them, yet every spoon has been carved by hand. Tiny differences reveal themselves only after careful observation. One handle curves slightly more than another. One bowl is a little deeper. Another displays the faint marks of careful knife work that no amount of sanding could completely erase. You pick one up. It is surprisingly smooth. Someone spent hours transforming an ordinary piece of wood into something another family might use every day for many years. That thought lingers with you. In the modern world, many objects pass quickly through our hands before being replaced. Here, almost everything is expected to last. A spoon, a bucket, a cloak, a pair of boots each represents many hours of someone's labor. Buying even the simplest item requires thought because replacing it later may not be easy. Several stalls farther along, woven cloth catches the growing sunlight. Deep browns, soft grays, muted greens, occasional hints of faded blue or reddish dye. Bright colors exist, but they remain uncommon and costly. Most people choose practical shades that hide dirt, wear slowly, and suit everyday life. Rolls of wool rest beside folded linen. each feeling different beneath careful fingertips. Customers have not yet filled the square, allowing merchants one last opportunity to examine their own displays with fresh eyes. A folded blanket is shaken gently to remove dust. Clay jugs are spaced evenly across a shelf. Bundles of onions are tied more securely. Strings holding smoked fish are tightened. Nothing dramatic happens. Everything simply becomes a little more orderly. The quiet continues to stretch. A church bell sounds again, this time closer than before. Several conversations pause. Heads lift briefly. Although trading is not fully begun, everyone understands that the morning is steadily advancing. Soon the peaceful preparation will give way to the slower rhythm of buying and selling. Near the center of the square, two officials walk together carrying a small wooden chest. Inside rest the town's official weights. One by one they visit merchants who sell grain, flour, butter, salt, and other goods measured by weight. Each scale is checked carefully. Iron pieces are placed upon balance arms. Tiny adjustments are made where needed. No one appears offended. Honest merchants welcome the inspection because it protects their reputation. Dishonest merchants, should any be present, have little choice but to accept it. Trust is built through repetition. The same inspections, the same standards, the same careful habits. Over many years these routines become almost invisible precisely because they work. As you continue walking, your attention shifts toward the sounds rather than the sights. Hammering echoes softly from a blacksmith's portable display as he adjusts a loose hinge on one of his wooden racks. Leather straps creak. Horses stamp their hooves against the ground. Someone laughs quietly at a familiar joke. A baby begins crying before quickly settling again. Birds continue singing above rooftops, as though unaware that one of the busiest days of the week is about to begin below them. None of these sounds compete with one another. Instead, they settle together into a gentle rhythm that seems perfectly suited to the slow arrival of morning. You stop beside a baker arranging fresh loaves in careful rows. He works without wasting movement. Each loaf is placed where customers can see it easily. Smaller loaves toward the front, larger ones behind. Round loaves together, long loaves together. The arrangement is practical rather than decorative. Bread is not merely food, it is necessity. Many customers arriving later will purchase little else before beginning the journey home. The baker wipes flour from his hands onto a linen cloth already dusted white from hours of work. His day began long before yours. While you walked beneath the stars, he was already tending the oven, judging its temperature by experience rather than instruments, adding wood when needed, removing loaves at precisely the right moment because waiting too long could ruin an entire batch. Market day often rewards work completed before sunrise. As more sunlight fills the square, small groups of early customers begin appearing along nearby streets. They do not rush. Some pause to greet neighbors. Others stop briefly to admire goods before continuing farther into the market. A farmer studies a row of iron tools without speaking. A woman carrying an empty basket quietly compares two different cloth merchants from several paces away before deciding which to visit first. Children remain close to parents, their curious eyes moving constantly from one stall to another. Everything unfolds gradually. Nobody expects to finish shopping within minutes. For many families, market day is an event measured in hours rather than moments. There are conversations to have, prices to compare, friends unexpectedly encountered after months apart, news to exchange, requests to make, questions to ask. The market is as much about people as it is about goods. You find yourself slowing even further. There seems little reason to hurry. Everywhere you look, someone is waiting patiently, waiting for customers, waiting for better weather, waiting for a shipment expected from another town, waiting for enough coins to justify packing everything again at sunset. Perhaps that is the hidden lesson of this quiet morning. A medieval market was not built upon excitement, it rested upon patience. Hundreds of ordinary people accepted that much of the day would be spent simply being ready, ready for the next customer, ready for the next conversation, ready for another small opportunity that might appear without warning. As the square fills little by little, the long hours ahead seem almost visible. stretching beyond the rooftops like the roads leading into the countryside. The market is finally awake, yet its busiest moments are still gently approaching, one steady footstep at a time. At last, the waiting begins to change. No single moment transforms the quiet preparation into a busy marketplace. There is no sudden roar of voices or dramatic rush through the streets. Instead, the change arrives gently, almost politely, as though the town itself is stretching after a long night's sleep. One family enters the square, then another. A farmer leading 2 sheep pauses near the edge before continuing forward. A woman carrying a basket filled with carefully wrapped eggs slows to admire a display of woven cloth. The market comes alive, one ordinary step at a time. Then the church bell rings. Its familiar sound spreads over rooftops and down narrow streets, reaching every corner of the town. The bell is neither hurried nor loud enough to overwhelm conversation. It simply marks the beginning of another working day, one more market among countless others that have filled this square over many generations. Around you, merchants straighten almost without thinking, not because they expect crowds to appear immediately, but because habit tells them this is the moment to become fully attentive. The first customers are often the most deliberate. They know exactly why they have come. Some wish to purchase bread while it is still warm. Others hope to buy the freshest vegetables before the best produce disappears. A blacksmith may need iron before beginning another commission later that afternoon. Every early purchase follows a practical purpose. You step aside as an elderly couple approaches a stall selling grain. Neither speaks for several moments. Instead, they quietly study the sacks arranged before them. One contains barley, another oats. A third holds wheat that appears slightly lighter in color than the rest. The merchant waits patiently. He does not interrupt their inspection or encourage them to decide more quickly. Eventually, the old man reaches into the grain with weathered fingers. He lets a small handful slip slowly back into the sack. The kernels fall with a soft rustling sound. Only after examining them closely does he begin asking questions. Where was it harvested? Has it remained dry? When did it arrive? The conversation unfolds slowly. Every answer matters. For a family living carefully from one season to the next, choosing poor grain could mean spoiled bread or wasted money. There is little room for careless decisions. Nearby, another merchant sells candles made from tallow. Their faint scent mixes with fresh bread, herbs, smoke, damp wool, leather, and the earthy smell of vegetables still carrying traces of the fields where they grew. The marketplace has developed its own living fragrance, changing subtly each time someone passes carrying another basket or opens another crate. You notice how different every customer behaves. Some move directly toward familiar merchants whose honesty has been earned over many years. Others wander slowly, comparing prices before making even the smallest purchase. A few simply observe. Not everyone arrives intending to buy. Some come to learn what goods are available. Some come hoping to hear news from neighboring villages. Others seek familiar faces more than merchandise. The market is one of the few places where many different lives briefly cross paths. A shepherd who spends weeks among distant hills may stand beside a town craftsman who rarely leaves the streets within the walls. A traveling merchant may share the same stretch of cobblestones with a farmer whose entire world lies only a few miles beyond the gate. For a few hours, their routines overlap. Children become increasingly visible. Unlike modern marketplaces filled with toys and bright distractions, medieval markets offer curiosity instead of entertainment. A young boy stops to watch a cooper fitting iron hoops around a barrel. He studies every movement with complete attention. Nearby, a little girl quietly traces embroidered patterns woven into a piece of linen while her mother discusses prices with the cloth seller. Neither child appears impatient. Waiting is something they have already begun learning. Life rarely moves quickly. A pair of dogs wanders between the stalls. They travel confidently, noses close to the ground, following invisible trails of scent left behind by breadcrumbs, spilled grain, or bits of meat dropped by accident. Every now and then one pauses hopefully beneath a butcher's table, before moving on when nothing appears. Nobody seems surprised by their presence. Animals belong here almost as naturally as people. Chickens cluck softly from wicker cages. Geese complain noisily whenever someone walks too close. A patient donkey lowers its head while waiting beside a cart whose owner is busy speaking with customers. Even the animals understand, in their own way, that much of market day consists of waiting. You continue walking without any destination in particular. That seems the proper pace. Every few steps reveal another small scene. A woman gently testing the strength of a woven basket. An elderly man polishing brass buckles, although they already shine. Two brothers quietly debating whether they can afford a new cooking pot before winter. A monk purchasing wax for candles needed at the monastery. Nothing dramatic, everything important. The marketplace reminds you that history is rarely built from extraordinary moments alone. Far more often it grows from ordinary decisions repeated by thousands of ordinary people. One loaf purchased, one tool repaired, one cloak mended, one sack of grain carried home. These quiet choices shape lives more than battles ever could. Near the center of the square, a merchant selling spices has attracted a modest gathering. His goods have traveled farther than almost anything else in the market. Small cloth bags hold pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and other precious seasonings that reached Europe through long chains of merchants crossing seas and deserts. Few customers purchase much. The prices remain beyond the reach of many families, yet people still pause to breathe their unfamiliar aromas. The scents seem almost magical compared with the everyday smells surrounding them. For a brief moment, distant lands feel surprisingly close. The merchant understands this. He never rushes curious visitors away simply because they cannot buy. Their interest itself helps draw others toward the stall. Elsewhere, a leather worker demonstrates the flexibility of a newly finished belt. He bends it gently, runs his thumb along carefully stitched edges, invites customers to feel the quality for themselves. There are no printed labels promising excellence, only reputation, only craftsmanship, only the quiet confidence of someone whose work must speak more clearly than any advertisement. The hours continue moving with remarkable steadiness. No one checks a clock. Time is measured differently here, by the position of sunlight crossing the square, by the lengthening shadows cast by nearby buildings, by the number of customers already served, by the slow emptying of baskets once filled before dawn. You become aware of your own body once again. Your shoulders feel slightly heavier than they did earlier. Standing on uneven stone has begun to tire your feet. The cool morning air has softened into comfortable warmth beneath the rising sun. Without realizing it, you have been moving slowly for hours. This quiet fatigue belongs to everyone around you. The baker wipes flour from his forehead. The potter stretches stiff fingers before lifting another stack of bowls. The woman selling herbs takes a careful sip from a wooden cup before returning to her customers. Nobody complains. This is simply how market day feels. Work arrives not in sudden bursts but in a long, steady stream. Some moments are busy. Others pass almost silently. Both are accepted with equal patience. As midday gradually approaches, the square becomes fuller. Conversations overlap without becoming overwhelming. Coins clink softly against one another. Wooden cartwheels creak as late arrivals search for places to unload. Church bells echo faintly in the distance once more. Smoke rises lazily into a brightening sky. The marketplace has reached the rhythm it will likely keep for many hours. Neither frantic nor idle, busy without haste, crowded without disorder. You realize that this is perhaps the greatest surprise of all. Modern imagination often paints medieval markets as places overflowing with endless excitement. The reality is gentler. The busiest day of the week is still built from patience, from routine, from careful observation, from people willing to stand for long hours because another customer may appear at any moment. The excitement exists only in small measures. A successful sale, a fair bargain, a familiar face unexpectedly returning, news from a distant village, fresh bread still warm from the oven. These modest moments quietly sustain the day. As you pause near the center of the bustling square, listening to hundreds of ordinary lives unfolding together, You understand that a medieval market is not merely a place where goods are exchanged. It is where time itself seems to slow, where strangers briefly become neighbors, where every careful purchase carries the weight of tomorrow, and where the simple act of waiting, repeated hour after hour, becomes one of the most ordinary and most remarkable parts of everyday life. As the morning settles comfortably into its middle hours, the market no longer feels as though it is beginning. It has found its rhythm. The first uncertainty of opening has faded. Merchants know where everything rests upon their tables. Customers have become familiar faces instead of scattered arrivals. The church bells have long since fallen silent, leaving behind only the countless ordinary sounds of people quietly going about their work. You notice that almost nobody walks quickly anymore. Those who hurried to buy fresh bread have already done so. Those with urgent business have found the merchants they needed. Now the pace becomes slower, almost thoughtful. Families drift from one row of stalls to another without any obvious destination, allowing themselves time to compare, observe, and consider. This slower rhythm feels natural. There are few reasons to rush. Many purchases represent weeks or even months of careful saving. A poor decision cannot easily be corrected next week. The market may not return for several days, perhaps longer depending upon the town. Choosing wisely matters far more than choosing quickly. You find yourself drawn toward the stalls where food is displayed. Long before brightly painted signs or glass-fronted shops, food announced itself through scent alone. Fresh bread remains impossible to overlook. Warm loaves continue emerging from baskets lined with coarse linen cloth, though the greatest morning rush has already passed. Their crisp crusts crack softly as they cool in the open air. Some customers gently press a loaf with careful fingers, judging its freshness without leaving noticeable marks. Others simply trust the baker they have known for years. Trust saves time. It also saves worry. Nearby, rounds of hard cheese rest upon thick wooden boards. Their surfaces are pale yellow, marked by the slow aging that gives them flavor and allows them to survive long journeys. A merchant slices tiny samples no larger than a fingernail. For familiar customers who wish to compare one wheel with another, nothing is wasted. Even the smallest piece carries value. You pause to watch an elderly woman purchase only enough cheese for a few modest meals. She counts her coins carefully before placing each one into the merchant's waiting hand. Neither person appears embarrassed by the slow exchange. Both understand that every coin represents many hours of labor. The merchant nods politely after counting the payment. The customer smiles with quiet relief. A simple purchase has been completed honestly. That alone is worth appreciating. Farther along the row stand baskets overflowing with vegetables. Carrots still carry traces of soil clinging to their roots. Cabbages display tightly folded leaves, glistening faintly beneath the sun. Turnips rest in neat piles beside onions tied together with dried stems. Bundles of leeks lean against one another like sleepy travelers after a long walk. Nothing appears perfectly shaped. Nature rarely produces perfect circles or identical sizes. People expect variety because every harvest is slightly different from the last. Season determines almost everything you see. Spring offers different colors from autumn. Summer brings abundance that winter quietly remembers. During colder months, preserved foods gradually replace fresh ones. Salted meat, dried peas, stored grain, pickled vegetables. The changing seasons shape every table long before anyone begins preparing a meal. You realize how deeply connected the market remains to the fields beyond the town walls. Every cabbage was once a seed. Every loaf began as grain swaying gently beneath the wind. Every onion spent months beneath the earth before finally reaching this wooden table. The distance between farm and market is surprisingly short. Many of the people selling these goods harvested them with their own hands only yesterday. A young farmer wipes dirt from his boots while speaking with a customer. His fingernails still hold dark traces of the morning's work despite washing them before leaving home. There is little separation between growing food and selling it. One follows naturally after the other. Nearby, jars of honey catch the sunlight. Golden liquid glows softly through thick glass, each jar reflecting tiny points of light across the wooden shelf beneath it. Bees have worked patiently for months to fill these containers. Their quiet labor continues to nourish families who may never see the hives from which the honey came. A child gazes at the jars with unmistakable admiration. His mother gently guides him onward. Perhaps today is not the day for such a purchase. Perhaps another season will be kinder. The boy does not protest. Disappointment, like patience, is something medieval children often learned early. You continue wandering until another scent reaches you. Herbs. Freshly gathered bundles hang upside down beneath the shade of a simple canvas roof. Mint, parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme. The fragrances drift together upon the warm air, offering brief freshness among heavier smells of leather, smoke, livestock, and damp timber. An elderly herbalist carefully explains different plants to a young woman, hoping to ease a family member's persistent cough. His voice remains soft. There is no dramatic promise, only quiet experience shared from one generation to another. Perhaps this herb will help. Perhaps another mixture will work better. Knowledge travels through conversation more than written books for many people here. Not every purchase satisfies hunger. Some seek comfort, others seek healing. Both matter equally. A little farther ahead, smoked meats hang from sturdy wooden beams. The rich scent of wood smoke lingers around them, even beneath the open sky. Hams, sausages, strips of preserved pork. Each has been prepared to last well beyond the freshness of ordinary meat. Without preservation, much food would disappear long before the next successful hunt or harvest. The methods are simple. Salt, smoke, thyme. 3 quiet partners working together against spoilage. You notice that customers rarely buy enormous quantities. Instead, they purchase only what they believe they can afford and carry home safely. Baskets remain modest. Bundles remain manageable. Everything must travel back along the same roads that brought people here this morning. Weight becomes another invisible form of currency. A sack too heavy may exhaust its owner long before reaching home. Nearby, 2 women compare eggs. They lift them carefully one at a time, holding each against the sunlight. Neither seems impatient. Quality deserves attention. The merchant waits calmly while they inspect every choice. He has likely watched this same careful ritual hundreds of times. The market teaches everyone the value of observation. Looking closely often prevents future regret. You become aware once again of the sounds surrounding you. Coins clink gently. Wood creaks. Someone laughs quietly after recognizing an old friend. A goose complains loudly before settling into silence again. A blacksmith's hammer rings faintly somewhere beyond the food stalls, reminding you that other parts of the market continue their own patient work. No sound dominates for long. Each rises gently before blending into another. The result feels less like noise and more like steady breathing. You stop beneath the shade of a broad canvas stretched across several neighboring stalls. The relief from direct sunlight is immediate. Merchants understand that comfort encourages customers to linger. A shaded table often attracts more visitors than one left exposed beneath the afternoon sun. Simple observations gathered through experience quietly improve every market day. An elderly man unwraps his midday meal. Nothing elaborate. A piece of coarse bread, a wedge of cheese, a small onion. He eats slowly while keeping one eye upon his stall. Business pauses for no one's hunger. Meals fit themselves around customers rather than the other way around. You realize that many merchants have been awake since long before dawn. Some baked through the night. Others loaded carts beneath the stars. Many walked several miles carrying goods before the town gates even opened. Now, standing for hours beneath changing weather, they continue working without complaint. Fatigue settles gently into every movement. Shoulders lower slightly. Steps become slower. Hands pause briefly before lifting another basket. The marketplace is entering its longest stretch of the day. Not exciting. Not exhausting enough to become unbearable. Simply long. Remarkably long. And perhaps that is what makes it feel so deeply human. History is often imagined through kings, castles, and battles. Yet most people who ever lived spent their days doing things much like this. Buying bread, comparing vegetables, saving coins, waiting patiently, sharing small conversations while deciding whether today was the right day to make an important purchase. As you continue wandering among the food stalls, surrounded by scents that have drifted through marketplaces for centuries, you begin to understand that survival was built from these quiet routines, not from extraordinary moments, but from countless ordinary choices, repeated week after week, season after season, until they became the steady heartbeat of medieval life. Leaving the comforting sense of bread, herbs, and fresh vegetables behind, you wander toward another part of the marketplace where the smells begin to change. Here, the warm aroma of baking gives way to the sharper scent of leather, freshly cut wood, iron warmed by repeated hammering, beeswax, and linseed oil. The food stalls satisfy today's hunger, but these craftsmen provide the objects that may remain useful for years. The pace is no different. Even here, where skilled hands have transformed simple materials into valuable possessions, nobody appears eager to hurry a customer toward making a purchase. A blacksmith stands beside a sturdy wooden rack displaying tools of many shapes: iron hammers, small hand axes, pruning hooks, kitchen knives, nails gathered into neat piles, simple hinges, fire pokers. Each piece reflects a dull gray shine rather than the bright polish often imagined in modern depictions. These are working tools meant to spend their lives in fields, kitchens, workshops, and barns. Beauty comes from reliability rather than decoration. You notice customers lifting each tool with surprising care. Weight matters. A hammer too heavy will tire the arm. One too light may fail to drive a nail properly. A knife should rest comfortably in the hand before anyone considers its sharpness. The blacksmith watches quietly while people test his work. He answers questions when asked but never interrupts thoughtful inspection. Confidence needs little advertisement. Nearby, the steady tap of another hammer continues. A young apprentice is repairing a damaged cooking pot rather than selling a new one. The owner waits patiently beside him, arms folded loosely across a faded wool cloak. Replacing the pot would cost far more than repairing it. In the medieval world, mending is almost always the wiser choice. A cracked handle is tightened, a loose rivet replaced, a bent rim carefully shaped back into place. Objects rarely reach the end of their usefulness after the first sign of wear. Instead, they begin another chapter. You find this strangely comforting. Almost everything around you has lived a longer life than it first appears. Boots have received fresh soles. Belts have gained new buckles. Wagons carry replacement wheels fashioned years after the original ones broke. Cloaks bear patches stitched so carefully that they almost seem part of the original fabric. Nothing is perfect. Everything is useful. A few steps farther on, the leather workers have arranged their goods beneath a broad awning. Belts hang neatly from wooden pegs. Pouches rest upon the table in tidy rows. Water flasks made from treated leather stand beside sturdy gloves designed for rough labor. The smell here is rich and unmistakable. Fresh leather carries traces of the oils used to soften it. Older pieces have already begun taking on the scent of everyday life: smoke, rain, and countless journeys. One merchant invites a farmer to examine a newly finished harness strap. Rather than speaking about its appearance, he bends the leather repeatedly. The material flexes without cracking. He points toward the stitching. Each thread lies evenly against the next. The customer nods slowly. Durability is far more persuasive than clever words. Across the narrow lane, a woodworker displays objects that seem almost humble compared with iron tools or leather goods: wooden bowls, ladles, rolling pins, small stools, simple chests. Yet every item bears subtle evidence of patient craftsmanship. The grain of the timber has been followed rather than forced. Smooth edges fit comfortably beneath the hand. Lids close cleanly without sticking. A family examines a sturdy wooden chest large enough to store clothing or grain. They do not ask first about its price. Instead, they test the hinges. Lift the lid. Press gently against each corner. The father kneels to inspect the underside where careless workmanship might be hidden. The merchant seems almost pleased by such careful examination. A chest expected to protect valuable belongings deserves close attention. Nearby, the potters have attracted a small crowd. Shelves are lined with bowls, pitchers, mugs, cooking pots, and storage jars, their warm earth-colored surfaces catching the afternoon light. Some pieces wear simple green glaze, others remain plain, their beauty found in balanced shape rather than bright decoration. A woman lifts a clay bowl and taps it lightly with one finger. The clear sound tells her more than appearance alone. A hidden crack often reveals itself through a dull note. Satisfied, she smiles gently before setting it back exactly where she found it. Another customer studies a water jug. Its handle feels comfortable. Its weight seems manageable. He imagines carrying it from the village well many hundreds of times before deciding whether it deserves a place in his home. Every purchase begins with imagination. People quietly picture the object becoming part of ordinary life. Will these boots survive another winter? Will this bucket carry water without leaking? Will this knife remain sharp enough through another harvest? If the answer feels uncertain, the coins remain safely inside the purse. The marketplace rewards patience once again. You continue wandering until brightly colored threads catch your attention. A weaver has arranged folded cloth beside carefully wound skeins of wool. Bundles of undyed fleece rest nearby, reminding customers of where every finished garment begins. The weaver patiently explains different textures to a young couple preparing for marriage. Fine linen costs more. Coarse wool lasts longer. Heavy cloth offers warmth through winter. Lighter fabric proves more comfortable during summer field work. There is no perfect choice, only the choice best suited to each family's circumstances. The conversation stretches pleasantly without pressure. No decision needs to be made immediately. Several stalls away, a traveling merchant displays goods unlike anything produced within the nearby villages. Small polished mirrors, decorative buckles, tiny glass beads, brass pens. A handful of imported objects whose long journeys have added quietly to their value. Children linger nearby, fascinated less by ownership than by novelty itself. Even adults pause longer than necessary, allowing their eyes to wander across unfamiliar shapes and materials. Sometimes curiosity costs nothing. As the afternoon progresses, you notice another important rhythm emerging. Not every merchant is busy at the same time. While the blacksmith serves several customers, the potter waits peacefully. Later, the leather worker becomes occupied while the weaver enjoys a few moments of rest. Business flows across the marketplace like a gentle breeze, never remaining in one place for very long. This uneven pace demands remarkable patience. Hours may pass between valuable sales. A merchant cannot allow disappointment to appear upon the face whenever customers walk away empty-handed. Most people simply nod politely and wait. Another opportunity will arrive eventually, perhaps. The uncertainty belongs to everyone. You pause beside an elderly craftsman carving small wooden toys. Unlike many objects surrounding him, these pieces are not strictly necessary. Tiny horses, simple birds, little spinning tops. A father purchases one no larger than the palm of his hand. His daughter accepts it with quiet delight, turning it over carefully as though it were made of silver. The craftsman smiles, not broadly, just enough to show satisfaction. Even small moments of happiness have a place in the marketplace. They simply arrive without fanfare. The afternoon sun shifts higher overhead. Shadows shorten. Warmth settles gently across the square. Several merchants remove heavy cloaks, folding them neatly beneath their tables until evening coolness returns. Others drink quietly from wooden cups before greeting the next customer with the same calm attention they offered the first. You begin to understand that reputation is perhaps the greatest treasure any craftsman possesses. A broken promise may travel through neighboring villages faster than any wagon. An honest repair, a fair price, a tool that survives many years. These become stories people willingly carry home. Long after coins have been spent, reputation continues working on behalf of its owner. That invisible wealth cannot be stored in a chest or counted at sunset. It must be earned patiently, one satisfied customer at a time. Standing among the rows of skilled craftsmen, surrounded by the quiet evidence of thousands of careful hours, you realize that medieval markets were not merely places where objects changed hands. They were places where trust, skill, and memory quietly became part of every transaction. Every repaired pot, every sharpened knife, every carefully stitched belt, every smoothly carved spoon, each carried something beyond its practical purpose. It carried the reputation of the hands that had made it, and the hope that it would faithfully serve another family through many ordinary days still waiting to come. By the time the afternoon has settled comfortably over the town, the market has reached a kind of balance. The busiest rush has eased, yet the square remains full of quiet purpose. Some customers are only just arriving after finishing work in nearby fields, while others prepare to leave with baskets noticeably heavier than when they entered through the town gate that morning. From where you stand, the marketplace almost appears to manage itself. Merchants speak with customers. Children remain close to parents. Animals wait with remarkable patience. Carts stand where they were left hours ago. Yet beneath this calm rhythm lies a careful structure that keeps everything working far more smoothly than it first appears. A market is not simply a collection of people gathering in one place. It is an agreement between merchants and buyers, between towns and surrounding villages, between those who make the rules and those expected to follow them. Without those quiet understandings, even the most ordinary market day could become uncertain. You notice one of the town officials once again making his slow journey through the square. Unlike a soldier marching with authority, or a noble demanding attention, he walks almost unnoticed. His clothing is practical, marked by the small badge of his office rather than expensive decoration. Most people acknowledge him with little more than a brief nod before returning to their work. His presence is familiar. That familiarity is important. Markets depend not only upon trade, but upon confidence that someone is quietly watching over fairness. He pauses beside a merchant selling grain. Without accusation or suspicion, he observes as a customer requests a measured quantity. The merchant lifts a wooden scoop, filling a standard measure until it reaches exactly the proper level. Not overflowing, not deliberately shallow. A straight piece of wood passes gently across the top, removing excess grain until the measure matches the town's accepted standard. Only then is it poured into the waiting sack. The official watches for a moment. Satisfied, he continues walking. The customer likely thinks little of this simple exchange. Yet moments like these quietly build trust over many years. Imagine if every merchant used a different measure. A pound in one corner of the square might become something entirely different in another. Every purchase would require endless debate. Every customer would carry uncertainty home alongside their goods. Standard measures spare everyone that trouble. Nearby, another official examines the length of a cloth recently purchased. A wooden measuring rod rests across the fabric, while both merchant and customer observe carefully. The measurement matches exactly. There is no disagreement. The cloth is folded neatly. Payment is completed, and both continue with their day. The entire inspection lasts less than a minute. Efficiency, you realize, often comes from clear expectations rather than hurried movement. You continue wandering through the market, noticing details that seemed invisible earlier. Many stalls display goods in carefully measured amounts. Bundles tied with equal lengths of cord. Cheese cut into familiar portions. Candles grouped in matching numbers. Everything has been arranged to reduce confusion. The more predictable the market becomes, the easier it is for everyone to participate. A father purchasing flour already knows approximately how much his family requires until the next market. A baker understands how much grain must be purchased to keep the ovens working. Experience quietly guides nearly every decision. The marketplace rewards those who remember. You stop beside a spice merchant who has finally found a quieter moment. Earlier, curious visitors gathered constantly around his display. Now he carefully rearranges tiny cloth bags that have shifted throughout the day. Nothing appears hurried. He brushes away a few scattered grains of pepper before smoothing the fabric covering his table. Presentation matters, not because customers expect perfection, because careful work inspires confidence. Across the lane, two merchants exchange polite conversation while waiting for new customers. They are not direct competitors. One sells pottery, the other woven baskets. Each understands that a lively market benefits everyone. People who come to purchase one thing often leave carrying another. Cooperation quietly exists alongside competition. You find this balance unexpectedly reassuring. Modern shopping often feels anonymous. Here, relationships stretch across many seasons. Merchants recognize familiar faces. Customers remember honest dealings. News travels quickly enough that fairness becomes valuable in ways difficult to measure. A dishonest trader may earn a few extra coins today. He may lose many more opportunities tomorrow. Reputation continues to shape the marketplace long after individual transactions are forgotten. As you walk farther, you notice a small disagreement unfolding. It attracts surprisingly little attention. A customer believes a length of rope is shorter than promised. The merchant politely disagrees. Rather than raising voices, they call for one of the nearby officials. The official arrives carrying the same measuring cord used throughout the market. Together they stretch the rope across the ground. The measurement settles the matter immediately. The rope matches its stated length. The customer nods with quiet acceptance. No embarrassment, no argument, simply certainty replacing doubt. The crowd barely pauses to watch before continuing with its own business. Perhaps that is the greatest success of good rules. They prevent conflict before it has time to grow. Your attention shifts toward another part of the square where stall fees are quietly being collected. Each merchant pays for the privilege of trading within the town. The amounts vary depending upon the size of the stall, the nature of the goods, and local custom. Coins pass discreetly from hand to hand. Receipts, when they exist, are simple. Most agreements rely upon familiar practice rather than elaborate paperwork. These payments help maintain the marketplace itself. Roads require repair. Town walls require maintenance. Officials require compensation for their work. Nothing functions entirely without cost. Even order has its price. You pause beside a fountain where several merchants have gathered briefly for water. Conversations drift lazily between them. Someone speaks about the recent weather. Another mentions a bridge several miles away that still needs repairs after heavy rain. A traveling merchant shares news from another town's market held 2 days earlier. The exchange feels relaxed. No one seems eager to dominate the conversation. Words move as patiently as everything else. Nearby, an elderly woman quietly recounts coins beneath the shade of her stall. She separates copper from silver with practiced fingers. Occasionally she pauses, thinking back through earlier sales. Did she already receive payment for those candles? Was the last customer given correct change? After another careful count, she smiles faintly. Everything balances. Accuracy brings peace of mind. Many merchants repeat this ritual several times throughout the day, not because they distrust customers, because memory grows tired after hours of conversation. Counting becomes another ordinary routine, as familiar as arranging goods or greeting new arrivals. The afternoon light begins changing almost without notice. Golden tones replace the brighter whiteness of midday. Shadows lengthen gradually beneath wagons and market tables. The warmth softens. Some merchants glance briefly toward the sky before returning to their work. There are still customers to serve, still opportunities waiting quietly somewhere among the crowd. You realize how remarkable it is that so many people can gather in one place with relatively little disorder. Certainly disagreements occur. Mistakes happen. Coins occasionally go missing. Animals become stubborn. Children wander farther than parents intended. Yet most of the day passes peacefully because everyone understands the shared expectations. Wait your turn. Measure honestly. Pay fairly. Respect the rules that allow everyone else to do the same. Simple principles repeated endlessly. As you stand near the center of the marketplace once again, listening to the calm murmur of ordinary business continuing beneath the afternoon sun, you begin to appreciate that the rules themselves are almost invisible. Visitors remember the bread, the spices, the leather belts, the pottery. Few remember the measuring rods, the balance scales, the patient officials, the agreed standards. Yet without those quiet foundations, none of the visible marketplace could function for very long. The medieval market is not held together by excitement. It is held together by trust. Trust measured in honest weights. Trust carried in familiar routines. trust earned through countless ordinary days much like this one, and as another customer approaches a nearby stall, beginning yet another careful conversation that may end with only a few exchanged coins, the great machinery of everyday medieval life continues turning as steadily and as patiently as it has since sunrise. The afternoon moves forward so gradually that you almost fail to notice it. The church tower still casts its long shadow across one edge of the market square, but the sunlight has softened. The brightness of midday has mellowed into warmer tones that settle gently over rooftops, wooden stalls, and the countless faces still moving patiently from one merchant to another. Hours have passed since you first entered the town. Your feet remind you of every one of them. The cobblestones that seemed merely uneven this morning now feel surprisingly hard beneath your boots. Every slight rise in the stone presses differently against the soles of your feet. You find yourself shifting your weight from one leg to the other without thinking, just as many merchants have been doing for hours. Standing, you discover, can be more tiring than walking. Walking allows the body to change its rhythm. Standing asks the same muscles to remain quietly at work for far longer. Around you, experienced merchants have developed small habits to ease the burden. One leans gently against the corner of a wooden stall whenever no customers are nearby. Another stretches stiff fingers before folding another piece of cloth. A baker rolls his shoulders once every few minutes while waiting for someone to approach. None of these movements are dramatic. They are simply quiet negotiations with fatigue. You realize that nearly everyone here is carrying some form of discomfort. The woman selling vegetables has been awake since long before sunrise. The cooper has spent the morning lifting barrels heavier than many people could comfortably move alone. The blacksmith's arms still ache from yesterday's work, long before today's labor is finished. Even customers grow weary after several hours of walking slowly from stall to stall while carrying increasingly heavy baskets. Market day asks much from everyone, not through sudden effort, through steady endurance. The weather also begins making its own quiet demands. Today the sky remains clear, allowing gentle warmth to settle across the square. Yet even pleasant weather requires adjustment. Merchants pull canvas awnings slightly farther forward to protect delicate goods from direct sunlight. Customers seek brief moments beneath patches of shade before continuing their errands. Water becomes more valuable with every passing hour. A young boy carries wooden buckets from the town well, carefully delivering fresh water to several nearby stalls. The buckets are not especially large. Even so, he walks cautiously, determined not to spill more than necessary over the uneven stones. Several merchants greet him by name. He smiles politely, accepts a few small coins for his work, and continues toward the next row of stalls. Small tasks such as these quietly support the entire market. Few visitors notice them. Without fresh water, however, the long afternoon would become far more difficult. You pause beneath the shade of a broad elm tree growing near one corner of the square. Its branches stretch wide enough to shelter several people at once. An elderly couple has already claimed one side of the shade, resting upon a low stone bench while sharing a simple meal. A loaf of coarse bread rests between them. A small knife divides it into careful portions. They speak very little. After hours spent among constant conversation, silence itself has become welcome. Watching them, you begin to appreciate how differently people measured comfort. No cushioned chairs, no cool buildings filled with moving air, no quick refreshments waiting around every corner. Comfort often meant nothing more complicated than a patch of shade, a place to sit for a few minutes, and enough food to restore your strength before standing once again. The breeze changes slightly. It carries new scents across the marketplace, fresh hay from carts waiting outside the square, warm leather heated by the afternoon sun, wood smoke drifting lazily from household chimneys where evening meals are beginning their slow preparation. These familiar smells mix with everything the market already contains until the air itself seems layered with ordinary life. A group of travelers enters through the northern street. Their clothing carries fine dust gathered from many miles of road. One horse lowers its head gratefully as soon as water is offered. Another traveler stretches stiff legs before lifting a bundle from the back of a cart. Long journeys leave their own quiet marks upon the body. Dust settles into every fold of clothing. Shoulders become sore beneath carrying straps. hands roughen around wagon handles and reins. The market offers more than goods. It offers a chance to pause, even if only briefly. Several travelers head first toward the baker. Others simply stand still for a few moments, allowing their eyes to adjust to the busy square after hours spent upon quiet roads. Their arrival reminds you that this marketplace serves many different lives at once. For townspeople, it is a familiar weekly routine. For travelers, it becomes a welcome interruption in a long journey. For farmers, it is an opportunity to exchange the fruits of their labor. For craftsmen, it is a chance to prove the value of patient skill. Each person arrives carrying different hopes, yet everyone shares the same afternoon. Nearby, clouds briefly drift across the sun. The change is small, almost unnoticed, yet the entire square softens. Colors become gentler. Shadows lose their sharp edges. Several merchants look upward instinctively, not because they fear immediate rain, but because weather deserves attention. A sudden shower could send customers hurrying for shelter. Cloth must be covered, books protected, flour kept dry. Preparedness becomes another quiet habit. The clouds continue moving. Within minutes the sunlight returns. Nothing changes. Still everyone seems relieved. You realize how closely medieval life remained tied to the sky above. Without weather forecasts, people simply watched. The color of clouds, the direction of the wind, the smell carried through the air. Nature rarely announced its intentions clearly. Experience filled the gaps. Farther along the square, a merchant selling cloaks carefully folds heavier garments toward the back of his stall. The afternoon no longer requires them. By evening they will once again become desirable. The market changes with the passing hours just as surely as it changes with the seasons. Morning belongs to preparation. Midday belongs to steady trade. Late afternoon gradually turns everyone's thoughts toward home. You notice customers beginning to ask different questions. Not whether they should buy something, whether they have enough time left to visit one more stall before beginning the journey back. A farmer adjusts the bundles hanging from either side of his donkey. He studies the sky briefly, calculates the distance home, then decides there is still time for one final purchase. Such quiet calculations happen everywhere around you. Every traveler balances opportunity against daylight. The roads become less welcoming after sunset. No one wishes to arrive home long after darkness has covered the countryside. Even so, nobody seems eager to leave too early. There may yet be another useful tool, another fair bargain, another familiar conversation worth having. You continue walking slowly, noticing how the market itself almost encourages this gentle pace. Narrow paths between stalls prevent rushing. Conversations naturally slow people down. Interesting displays invite another lingering glance. Children pause to admire carved toys. Adults stop to exchange greetings with neighbors unexpectedly encountered after many weeks apart. Time stretches comfortably. There is no sense that it is being wasted. The afternoon simply unfolds, as it always has, as it likely always will. Your own breathing has settled into the same rhythm as the market. Slow, even, patient. The constant movement no longer feels busy. Instead, it resembles the steady flow of a river whose surface changes from moment to moment, while the current beneath remains constant. Perhaps that is why market day leaves such lasting memories. Not because extraordinary things happen, but because ordinary things happen together. Thousands of quiet moments shared by people who may never meet again. The merchant handing over a carefully wrapped loaf. The farmer thanking the blacksmith for repairing a broken tool. The child proudly carrying a tiny wooden toy. The traveler filling a water flask before continuing a long road home. None of these moments will appear in great chronicles. No king will record them. No castle will be built in their honor. Yet together they form the true rhythm of medieval life. Standing beneath the warm afternoon sky, surrounded by patient workers whose day is far from over, you begin to understand that endurance is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply the willingness to remain present, to keep working, to keep waiting, to keep rating the next customer with the same quiet kindness as the first. Hour after hour, One ordinary afternoon at a time, the busiest conversations of the day have begun to soften, not because fewer people remain in the market, but because many of them have already finished the most important purchases. Their baskets now hold bread wrapped in linen, carefully chosen vegetables, perhaps a repaired tool or a new cooking pot. With practical needs mostly satisfied, there is finally room for something less urgent. People begin to linger. You notice small groups forming near the edges of the square, not around stalls filled with expensive goods, but wherever there is a little shade, an empty barrel to lean against, or a low stone wall where tired legs can rest. The conversations unfolding there are not about prices alone. They're about people, about places, about news. For many living in scattered villages, the marketplace is one of the few opportunities to hear what lies beyond the familiar roads surrounding home. A merchant who has traveled several days carries more than cloth or spices. He carries stories. You find yourself standing beside a wagon whose owner has arrived from another town many miles away. Dust still clings to the wheels despite the morning's activity. The horses wear the patient expression of animals accustomed to long journeys, lowering their heads whenever a brief chance to rest presents itself. The merchant speaks calmly with several curious listeners. He does not perform for a crowd. He simply answers questions. How were the roads? Has the bridge near the river finally been repaired? Did the harvest begin early farther south? Were prices higher at the last market? His replies are steady and practical. The bridge still needs work. The roads remain muddy after recent rain. The wheat looks promising. Salt has become slightly more expensive. Nothing sounds extraordinary. Yet everyone listens carefully. Information travels slowly in your world. Even ordinary details may influence decisions for weeks ahead. A farmer considering a journey next month quietly remembers the warning about the damaged bridge. Another merchant thinks about purchasing extra salt before prices climb further. Small pieces of knowledge become valuable because they arrive so rarely. A young apprentice joins the conversation for a few moments before returning to his master's stall. He has heard enough to satisfy his curiosity. Work still waits. It almost always does. Nearby, two women exchange news about relatives living in another village. Their conversation moves gently between practical matters and quiet concern. One family welcomed a new child. Another household lost an elderly grandfather during the previous winter. Someone's daughter is preparing for marriage before autumn arrives. Someone else's son has begun learning a trade. Life continues. Not dramatically, simply one season after another. The marketplace allows these scattered lives to reconnect, if only briefly. You begin to notice how often greetings interrupt ordinary business. A customer walking toward the baker's suddenly recognizes an old neighbor. Two shepherds who have spent weeks tending distant hills stop to clasp hands before speaking. Children stare at one another uncertainly for a moment, before remembering games shared months earlier. Smiles appear quietly, not loudly, not theatrically, just enough to remind everyone that familiar faces remain among the crowd. The market is selling something impossible to weigh upon official scales. Connection. You continue walking until you notice a man sitting quietly upon an overturned barrel, with a small stringed instrument resting across his lap. He is not performing a grand concert. There is no gathering audience. Instead, he plucks a slow melody almost absent-mindedly, while waiting for someone he appears to be traveling with. The notes drift gently through the afternoon air before blending into conversations, footsteps, and distant hammering. Some people notice. Others continue past without slowing. The music asks for nothing. It simply becomes another thread woven into the sound of the day. A few children pause nearby. One begins humming softly before being called away by a parent. The melody disappears as naturally as it arrived. You smile to yourself. Entertainment in the medieval world often grows from ordinary moments rather than carefully planned performances. Across the square, another gathering has formed. Not around music, around a traveler describing a distant town. His hands move slowly as he speaks. He explains the size of its stone walls, the number of churches, the market held there every fortnight instead of every week. Someone asks whether the roads are safe. Another wonders if the blacksmith there truly makes tools of unusual quality. Nobody questions every detail. Neither does everyone believe everything they hear. Experience teaches cautious listening. Stories often grow slightly with every journey. Truth remains somewhere within them. The market serves as both marketplace and messenger. Long before newspapers or printed notices, voices carry information from village to village, one conversation at a time. You realize that many people standing together have never traveled farther than a day's walk from home. For them, these travelers provide brief windows into a wider world. A monastery beyond the hills, a fishing village beside the coast, a castle where repairs continue after winter storms, a forest where wolves have recently been seen. Every story gently expands the boundaries of imagination. Without leaving the market square, listeners travel dozens of miles through another person's memory. Nearby, an elderly merchant laughs quietly while remembering his younger days. He points toward a weathered scar running across one wagon wheel. According to his story, it appeared after striking a hidden stone during a spring journey many years ago. His companions smile. Perhaps they have heard the tale before. They listen anyway. Some stories become companions themselves. Familiar, comforting, expected. The afternoon sun continues moving steadily westward. Its changing angle paints warm light across faces that earlier stood in brighter daylight. Golden reflections dance upon polished buckles and glazed pottery. The shadows beneath carts grow longer. Almost everyone notices without consciously thinking about it. Time is becoming visible. A mother gently reminds her children that they still need to purchase flour before leaving. A shepherd glances toward the western road. Several merchants quietly rearrange remaining goods, preparing for the slower final hours ahead. Still, nobody seems anxious. The market has its own natural ending. There is no need to rush toward it. You pause beside the fountain once more. Fresh water continues flowing steadily into the stone basin. Just as it has throughout the day, people come and go. Water remains. A traveling monk fills a wooden flask before thanking the nearby townsman who has patiently waited his turn. Courtesy requires no special effort. It simply belongs here. Across the square, two craftsmen compare techniques for repairing cracked wooden wheels. Neither seems concerned about sharing knowledge. Each understands that another skilled craftsman strengthens the trade rather than weakening it. Competition exists. So does cooperation. Both have their place. You begin thinking about how much unseen knowledge surrounds you, how to judge healthy grain, how to repair worn leather, how to preserve meat through winter, how to recognize trustworthy merchants, how to read changing weather from distant clouds. None of these lessons are written upon signs. Most pass quietly from one generation to the next, father to son, mother to daughter, master to apprentice, neighbor to neighbor. Conversation itself becomes a kind of library. The marketplace is one of its busiest reading rooms. A gentle breeze crosses the square once more, carrying with it the distant smell of fresh bread from another oven preparing the evening's final batch. The scent mingles with smoke, horses, herbs, damp wood, and warm earth until it feels impossible to separate one from another. Just like the people gathered here, every life remains distinct. Yet for one afternoon each week, they blend together into something larger. As you stand listening to conversations that drift from weather to harvests, from family news to distant roads, you begin to understand that medieval markets traded far more than goods. They traded experience, advice, memory, warnings, hope. Small pieces of the wider world carried patiently from one place to another, by ordinary people whose greatest journeys often began with nothing more remarkable than walking through a familiar town gate at sunrise. As the afternoon slowly stretches toward evening, something almost invisible begins to change. The market is still busy. Customers continue to arrive. Coins still pass from one hand to another. Merchants continue greeting each visitor with the same quiet patience they have shown since morning. Yet the pace has softened even further. The urgency that belonged to the early hours has almost completely disappeared. Those who came with long lists have already finished most of their shopping. Those who hurried to secure the freshest bread or the finest vegetables, now carry their purchases homeward along country roads. What remains is a gentler rhythm, one built upon waiting rather than searching. You find yourself noticing the pauses between conversations. A merchant finishes wrapping a loaf of bread in coarse linen before watching the next customer from across the square. He does not call out. He simply waits. A potter carefully wipes dust from a row of bowls that already appear perfectly clean. An herbalist reties bundles of dried sage and thyme, although they have hardly moved since midday. Across from them, a basket maker straightens a display that no customer has disturbed for nearly half an hour. The work never completely stops. It simply becomes quieter. You pause beside the stall of a candle maker. Rows of pale tallow candles rest upon rough wooden shelves, their surfaces marked by tiny imperfections left behind during cooling. The merchant adjusts them one by one. He turns one slightly toward the light, moves another closer to the front, brushes away a few grains of dust with the sleeve of his tunic. None of these tasks are urgent. They simply give the hand something useful to do while the eyes continue watching the flow of people. Waiting becomes its own occupation. The longer you remain in the market, the more clearly you understand that much of medieval work consisted of this patient readiness. Not constant labor, not constant rest. Something between the two. Always prepared, always attentive, never entirely idle. A woman selling woven blankets quietly folds one that has already been unfolded several times by curious customers. The wool feels thick and warm beneath her hands. She smooths the edges carefully before placing it back upon the stack. Perhaps someone else will examine it before sunset. Perhaps not. Either possibility is accepted without frustration. Hope remains gentle. Nearby, two boys sit together upon an overturned crate while waiting for their father to finish speaking with a merchant. At first they seem restless. One traces patterns in the dust with a small stick. The other watches pigeons wandering confidently between the stalls. Soon both become absorbed in quietly guessing where each bird might walk next. Children, like adults, slowly adapt to the rhythm surrounding them. The market teaches patience without ever announcing the lesson. You continue strolling through familiar rows that now feel almost comforting. The same baker, the same cookware, the same leather worker. Hours spent walking among them have transformed strangers into recognizable faces. Although you know almost none of their names, you begin recognizing small habits. The baker always brushes flour from his hands before speaking with the customer. The blacksmith pauses briefly after every conversation to rest one hand upon his workbench. The potter unconsciously hums while rearranging bowls. The spice merchant smiles slightly whenever someone pauses simply to admire unfamiliar scents. These tiny routines make each person seem quietly human. History often remembers occupations: baker, smith, merchant, farmer. Yet standing here, you remember individuals instead. A man adjusting a crooked knife display, a woman carefully counting eggs, an apprentice struggling to suppress a yawn after rising long before dawn. Ordinary people leave the strongest impressions. Near the center of the square, a merchant unlocks a small wooden box beneath his table. Inside rests the day's earnings. He lifts the coins onto a folded cloth and begins counting them slowly. Copper pieces first, then silver. Occasionally he pauses, staring thoughtfully at the growing stacks. Not because he has forgotten how to count, because he is remembering each sale. The large sack of barley purchased before midday. The repaired buckle. The cooking pot sold shortly after lunch. The belt bought by the farmer preparing for autumn work. Every coin carries a memory. After counting everything twice, he returns the money carefully to the box. The lock clicks shut. Moments later, another customer arrives. The box disappears beneath the table once again. The work continues. Elsewhere, a woman selling apples quietly removes several pieces that have begun showing soft spots. They are not spoiled. Not yet. She places them into a smaller basket beside her stool. Perhaps they will become supper rather than tomorrow's merchandise. Nothing useful is wasted if it can still serve another purpose. The thought returns again and again throughout the day. Repair rather than replace. Reuse rather than discard. Consume carefully rather than carelessly. The market reflects these quiet values in almost every corner. A breeze stirs loose straw scattered across the cobblestones. For a moment it dances lightly through shafts of golden sunlight before settling again beneath the cart. Dust follows. Tiny particles rise and drift almost lazily through the warm air. You watch them for longer than expected, perhaps because the afternoon itself seems to move with the same gentle slowness. Time has stretched, not unpleasantly, simply enough that each small detail becomes easier to notice. Farther away, a traveling merchant leans comfortably against his wagon. There are no customers at the moment. Instead of appearing impatient, he removes a small whetstone and begins sharpening a pocket knife. Long strokes, even pressure. Steel glides across stone with a quiet whisper, another useful task filling another waiting moment. Nobody stands completely still for very long. Hands naturally seek work. Not because someone demands it, because useful habits had been practiced for many years. An elderly woman knitting beside her stall continues working while speaking with customers. Without looking directly at her hands, she guides the yarn through practiced fingers. A few stitches, a brief conversation, another few stitches. Hours accumulate almost unnoticed through such small rhythms. You begin wondering how many market days these people have already experienced. Perhaps dozens, perhaps hundreds. The baker may have stood behind the same table since childhood, first helping parents, later managing the stall alone. The cooper may recognize families whose grandparents once purchased barrels from his own father. The marketplace remembers people even when people themselves grow older. Its routines outlast individual lives. Church bells sound faintly once more in the distance. This time may seem softer, not because the bells themselves have changed, because the afternoon has become quieter. Several merchants glance instinctively toward the lowering sun. Nobody begins packing, not yet. There is still honest business to be done. Still another customer may appear around the next corner. Still another conversation may begin before daylight fades. Hope remains present until the very end. That patience impresses you more with every passing hour. There is no frustration in the waiting, only acceptance. Some days are generous, others less so. Tomorrow's work will continue regardless. Standing near the middle of the market, listening to footsteps crossing familiar cobblestones, you realize that this long afternoon has revealed something unexpected. A medieval market was never defined by constant excitement. It was defined by endurance, by people willing to spend hours preparing, waiting, serving, repairing, arranging, counting, and beginning again. The true work existed not in rare moments of celebration, but in the countless quiet intervals between them. And perhaps those quiet intervals, filled with patient hands and steady hearts, tell us more about everyday medieval life than any grand event ever could. The afternoon has begun its quiet journey toward evening. Without anyone announcing it, the marketplace slowly starts changing once again. The transformation is as gentle as the morning awakening had been. No bell declares that the busiest hours are over. No official tells merchants to prepare for departure. Instead, everyone notices the same small signs at nearly the same time. The sunlight has turned softer. The shadows have grown longer. The air carries a hint of coolness that was absent only an hour before. You stand near the center of the square and watch as the rhythm that has guided the entire day begins to slow. Customers still arrive, but fewer than before. Many now carry full baskets resting heavily against tired arms. Some pause only briefly before making one final purchase. Others simply walk through the market, checking that nothing important has been forgotten before beginning the journey home. The merchants recognize this stage of the day well. Their attention never fades, but it becomes calmer. There is less expectation of a great rush and more appreciation for every remaining customer who stops at the stall. The baker has noticeably fewer loaves than he displayed this morning. Empty spaces have appeared upon his shelves. Rather than spreading the remaining bread apart to make the display seem fuller, he leaves the gaps untouched. They quietly tell the story of a successful day. One final customer chooses a round loaf still carrying a trace of warmth. The baker wraps it carefully in linen before accepting payment with the same patience he has shown since sunrise. No movement is wasted. No gesture feels hurried. Nearby, the vegetable seller studies her baskets. The freshest greens disappeared hours ago. Only a handful of onions, several cabbages, and a few sturdy turnips remain. She gathers them into smaller groups, making them easier to carry when the time comes to pack everything away. The work is not yet finished. It is simply changing. A cooper begins rolling 2 empty barrels toward his wagon, not because he intends to leave immediately, but because lifting them now will save effort later. Each barrel moves slowly over the cobblestones, producing the familiar hollow rumble that has echoed through marketplaces for generations. He pauses halfway across the square to catch his breath. No one minds. There is still time. The blacksmith wipes soot from his hands, using a worn piece of cloth already stained by years of similar afternoons. His display of tools remains neatly arranged, though several spaces stand empty where hammers and knives once rested earlier in the day. He glances across the square before returning to polish the handle of a small woodworking chisel. Even in these quieter hours, presentation still matters. Another customer may yet arrive. A family approaches the pottery stall with careful steps. Perhaps they waited intentionally until later in the day, hoping prices might become a little more flexible before closing. The potter welcomes them with the same calm smile he has offered everyone else. They examine several bowls before settling upon 2 modest pieces. The conversation unfolds slowly. Neither side appears eager to rush toward agreement. A slight adjustment in price is offered. The customer nods. The merchant wraps each bowl in straw with practiced hands. A final sale. Small, perhaps, yet no less important than the first purchase made that morning. You notice similar moments unfolding everywhere. A leather worker sells one last belt. An herbalist measures a final bundle of dried mint. A basket maker accepts payment for a sturdy storage basket after nearly an hour without customers. Each transaction carries quiet satisfaction, not triumph, simply gratitude that another object has found a useful home. The sounds surrounding you begin changing as well. Earlier conversations overlapped constantly, creating a gentle hum across the marketplace. Now those voices separate more clearly. You hear individual greetings, a laugh from somewhere near the fountain, the creak of wagon wheels being turned into position for loading, the flutter of pigeons settling upon rooftops after spending the day searching beneath tables. Even the animals seem aware that evening approaches. The donkey standing beside the cooper's wagon shifts its weight lazily, lowering its head as though anticipating the journey home. Several horses drink deeply before being harnessed once again. A pair of geese protest loudly when lifted into wicker baskets, only to settle after a few moments. Their complaints drift briefly across the square before disappearing into the growing quiet. You continue wandering slowly. The market feels different now, not smaller, simply more spacious. Pathways that required careful weaving through crowds earlier now allow easy passage. You can see farther across the square without interruption. Merchants who scarcely had time to exchange greetings during the busiest hours now pause for brief conversations with neighboring stalls. One asks about another's sales. Another comments upon the pleasant weather. Someone jokes softly that tomorrow's aching feet will remind everyone how successful today's market truly was. The laughter remains gentle, almost tired. The sort of laughter shared among people who understand exactly how much work lies behind ordinary accomplishments. Near the fountain, several children finally sit down after spending much of the day following parents through the crowded square. Their energy has faded. One leans sleepily against a basket nearly as large as himself. Another quietly watches fish swimming beneath the surface of the shallow water. The excitement of seeing so many unfamiliar things has gradually given way to simple weariness. Adults seem much the same. Shoulders rest lower than they did that morning. Steps have become slower. Hands carry the comfortable heaviness that follows honest work. Fatigue settles across the marketplace, not like a burden, but like a familiar companion. Everyone expected it. Everyone accepts it. The afternoon breeze grows cooler. Several merchants pull light cloaks back over their shoulders. Canvas awnings flutter softly above nearly empty displays. Loose pieces of straw roll gently across the cobblestones before gathering beside wagon wheels. The scent of fresh bread has almost disappeared, replaced now by wood smoke rising from nearby homes where evening meals are beginning. Families beyond the marketplace are preparing their fires. Pots are being placed above glowing coals. Doors are opening. Windows are catching the golden light of the lowering sun. The town itself is preparing for another evening even while the market completes its final chapter. You pause beside the spice merchant one last time. His tiny cloth bags have been tied securely once again. The bright aromas that drew curious visitors throughout the day remain, though fewer people stop to admire them now. He carefully places each bundle into a sturdy wooden chest lined with cloth. Nothing is hurried. Fragile goods deserve patient handling from beginning to end. Watching him work, you realize how many times these exact movements have been repeated throughout his life. Open the chest, arrange the spices, serve customers, pack everything away, close the chest, load the wagon, travel to the next town, begin again. Routine, more than novelty, shapes the rhythm of his years. As the sunlight turns richer and the shadows stretch almost the full width of the square, you understand that the market has entered its quiet conclusion. Not an ending filled with ceremony, simply another ordinary evening, arriving exactly as expected. The work is nearly done. The waiting is almost over. Soon the roads leading away from the town will once again fill with travelers carrying purchases, stories, and the quiet satisfaction of another market day, patiently brought to its close. The sun now hangs lower above the rooftops, and its golden light begins slipping across the market square, instead of shining directly into it. Every object seems softer than before. Wooden stalls glow with warm amber tones. Stone walls lose the sharp brightness they carried at midday. Even the dust rising beneath passing feet appears to drift more slowly through the evening air. You have been here since before dawn. Without realizing it, the market has become familiar enough that you instinctively know where to find each merchant. The baker still occupies the same corner beside the well-used oven. The cooper remains beside his neatly stacked barrels. The herbalist continues arranging small bundles of dried plants with patient hands. The blacksmith's tools still catch the fading light, though far fewer remain upon the display than they did hours ago. There is comfort in this familiarity. The market has not entertained you through surprises. It has quietly welcomed you into its routine. That routine now approaches its final hours. One by one, merchants begin making preparations that would have seemed unnecessary earlier in the day. A cloth merchant folds bolts of linen more carefully than before, smoothing every crease before placing them into a wooden chest. The fabric must remain dry during the journey home. Moisture gathered overnight could ruin weeks of careful work. Each fold is deliberate. Corners are aligned, edges are straightened. The task cannot be rushed without creating more work tomorrow. Nearby, a basket maker examines his remaining stock. A few baskets have become slightly misshapen after being handled repeatedly throughout the day. He gently presses the willow back into place, checking each woven strand with experienced fingers. Tiny repairs made now prevent larger problems later. Maintenance never truly ends. It simply changes with the hour. Across the square, the butcher has almost completely sold his fresh meat. Only a few carefully wrapped portions remain hanging beneath the shade of his stall. He knows they cannot wait until another market day. What is left will either be preserved, shared with family, or sold before darkness arrives. Time governs every trade differently. The potter can safely carry unsold bowls home. The cloth merchant can unfold fabric again next week. Fresh food follows stricter rules. You begin noticing wagons returning to life. Throughout the busiest hours they stood patiently beside the square, their wheels resting motionless while goods disappeared little by little from wooden tables. Now ropes are untied, tailgates lowered, blankets spread across wagon beds to protect fragile items during the journey. Packing requires just as much attention as unpacking. A poorly balanced load may shift along rough country roads. One broken wheel could turn a short journey into an exhausting delay. Every basket and crate is placed with quiet purpose. Heavy goods first, delicate items above them. Empty space is filled carefully so nothing slides unnecessarily. You watch a father teaching his young son how to secure a load with thick hemp rope. The boy pulls the knot tightly. His father shakes his head gently. Not tight enough. He demonstrates again, slower this time. The rope loops beneath itself before being drawn firmly into place. The boy repeats the movement. This time the knot holds. His father nods with quiet approval. No long explanation is needed. Learning often happens through watching, then trying once more. Nearby, two neighboring merchants help one another lift a heavy storage chest onto a waiting cart. Neither asks for payment. Tomorrow the favor may be returned. Communities survive through countless small acts of cooperation that rarely receive special attention. One pair of hands steadies the chest while another pushes from below. Together the task becomes simple. Alone it would have strained both backs. The afternoon breeze carries the pleasant scent of nearby hearth fires. Families throughout the town have begun preparing evening meals. Thin ribbons of smoke rise above rooftops, catching the last bright rays of sunlight before fading into the pale sky. The smell reminds many people that the day is ending. Several customers make one final stop at the baker's stall. Fresh bread for supper, perhaps a small honey cake if enough coins remain. The baker's shelves are nearly empty now. He seems quietly satisfied. Very little will need carrying home. Waste has been avoided. Good fortune often looks remarkably ordinary. A successful market day is measured not by celebration, but by empty shelves. You wander toward the edge of the square where several farmers have gathered beside their wagons. The conversations here sound different from those earlier in the afternoon. People are no longer discussing what they hope to buy. Instead, they compare what remains to be done after returning home. Animals still need feeding. Wood must be gathered before darkness. Fences require checking. Tomorrow's work has already begun forming inside today's conversations. The market occupies only part of life. Home waits patiently beyond the town gate. One elderly farmer removes his boots for just a moment while sitting upon a wagon step. He rubs his tired feet before pulling them back on again. The relief lasts only a minute. It is enough. Around him, others stretch stiff shoulders or gently rotate aching wrists. No one complains dramatically. Fatigue belongs to honest work. Everyone expected it when the day began. You pause near the stone fountain once again. The water reflects the deepening colors of the evening sky. Earlier children splashed their hands here while laughing quietly. Now only a few travelers remain, filling flasks before beginning the road home. The square feels larger than it did at midday, not because it has changed, because space has slowly returned between the people. The pigeons reclaim more of the cobblestones. A curious cat emerges from beneath a wagon, cautiously investigating the scraps left behind by the busy day. Even the animals seem aware that the market is winding down. The sounds continue fading. Fewer voices overlap. More individual footsteps become noticeable. The clink of a single coin carries farther than before. A closing chest produces a satisfying wooden thud. Leather straps creak as wagons are tightened for travel. The market is not becoming silent. It is simply allowing each sound more room to breathe. The church bell rings once again. Its familiar tone rolls gently across the rooftops. Nobody startles. Nobody hurries. The bell does not command the market to end. It simply reminds everyone that another portion of the day has quietly slipped away. Time has always been the invisible merchant here, trading 1 hour for the next without asking anyone's permission. You look toward the western gate where the first wagons have already begun departing. The wheels roll slowly over worn stone before finding the packed earth road beyond the town walls. Dust rises briefly behind them, then settles again. Families walk beside their carts rather than riding whenever possible, saving their animals unnecessary effort. Children grow quieter. Long hours of excitement finally give way to comfortable exhaustion. Some rest their heads against sacks of grain. Others hold tightly to newly purchased wooden toys, determined not to let them disappear among the family's belongings. The toys may have cost only a few coins. To the children, they are treasures. The merchant who carved them is likely already packing away the remaining pieces. He knows another market will come. Another child will smile. Another afternoon will pass. Watching the slow departure of these first travelers, you begin to understand something surprisingly comforting. The market never truly ends. It simply pauses. Its tables will stand empty tonight. Its wagons will return to barns and workshops. Its merchants will rest tired hands beside evening fires. But somewhere beyond tomorrow's sunrise, another square will fill again. Another baker will arrange warm loaves. Another blacksmith will polish iron tools. Another family will count carefully saved coins before leaving home. The rhythm continues because ordinary life continues, patiently, faithfully, week after week, season after season, year after year, and the market, like the people who depend upon it, quietly endures. The final hour of the market arrives so quietly that, had you not spent the entire day here, you might not notice it at all. No horn announces the close of trading. No great crowd suddenly disappears. Instead, the square slowly exhales. One conversation ends without another immediately taking its place. A merchant closes the lid of a wooden chest. A wagon rolls gently toward the gate. A customer pauses to look back across the market before continuing home. Little by little, the day releases its hold. You remain where you are for a while longer, allowing the scene to settle around you. The baker lifts the last empty basket from his table. Only a few crumbs remain scattered across the rough wooden surface. He brushes them carefully into his hand before tossing them toward a pair of waiting pigeons. The birds hurry forward without hesitation. Even the smallest leftovers become useful to someone. Nearby, the vegetable seller ties together the remaining onions with practiced fingers. The unsold cabbages are loaded into a wicker basket that has become much lighter than it was before sunrise. She pauses for a moment, looking across the square. Not because she expects more customers, simply because ending a long day deserves a quiet breath. The blacksmith fastens leather straps across a wooden crate filled with tools that did not find new owners today. He does not seem disappointed. Iron does not spoil overnight. Another market will come. Another farmer will eventually need a new axe. Patience is as important to a craftsman as skill. Across the marketplace, the spice merchant secures the heavy lid of his chest. The familiar scents of pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and dried herbs slowly fade as the lid closes. For hours those fragrances drifted gently through the square, inviting curious visitors to imagine distant lands beyond the horizon. Now they begin another journey themselves. Packed safely inside the wagon, they will travel dusty roads beneath stars before appearing once more in another town. The market has always been moving. Even while standing still, you walk slowly toward the fountain for one last look. The water continues flowing exactly as it did at dawn. It has watched merchants arrive, children laugh, travelers exchange news, officials check measures, wagons unload, animals wait, customers bargain, craftsmen repair, and families prepare for home. Through it all, the water simply continued flowing. There is something peaceful about that quiet constancy. A young apprentice kneels beside the fountain, washing soot from his hands. The dark water swirls away between the stones. He studies his palms for a moment. Tomorrow there will be more soot, more hammering, more work to learn. Today has ended. Another day already waits somewhere ahead. The market has taught him without ceremony. You notice several merchants exchanging farewells before leaving, nothing elaborate. A nod, a raised hand, a wish for safe travel. Many of these people have shared countless market days together. They know one another's routines almost as well as their own. Next week, if weather allows, they will likely stand in nearly the same places once again. There is comfort in repetition. Modern life often searches for constant novelty. Here, familiarity itself is a quiet blessing. The last customers leave carrying bundles wrapped carefully in cloth. One family balances baskets across a donkey's back. Another carries everything by hand. An elderly couple walks slowly through the gate, stopping only once so the husband can adjust the weight of a sack resting against his shoulder. Nobody seems eager. There is no reason to hurry now. The road home has become part of the day rather than its interruption. Beyond the market square, evening settles gently across the town. Windows begin glowing with warm firelight. The smell of cooking grows stronger. Wood smoke drifts lazily above the rooftops before disappearing into the deepening blue of the sky. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once before falling silent again. Church bells ring softly in the distance, their familiar voices sounding calmer than ever in the cooling air. The square itself grows wonderfully spacious. Where hundreds of footsteps crossed only hours before, long shadows now stretch across open cobblestones. A forgotten piece of straw rolls quietly in the breeze. A loose feather catches briefly against the leg of an empty stall. The pigeons move confidently through the open space, searching for whatever tiny treasures the day has left behind. The market seems almost reluctant to disappear. Its presence lingers even after the people have gone. You imagine tomorrow morning. The square will appear almost ordinary again. No stalls, no barrels, no baskets filled with vegetables, no scent of fresh bread drifting across the stones. Only an open space waiting patiently for another market day to arrive. Without the people, it becomes simply a square. It is human routine that transforms it into something remarkable. Standing alone for these final moments, you realize how different the truth feels from the noisy image that history often creates. A busy medieval market was certainly full of people. It was certainly filled with work, yet it was not chaotic. It was not endlessly loud. It was not a place of constant shouting or frantic movement. It was something quieter, more patient, more deliberate. Its busiest day was built from thousands of ordinary actions repeated with care. Hands measuring grain honestly, boots wearing smooth paths across familiar cobblestones, neighbors exchanging news, craftsmen repairing rather than replacing, families counting coins before making thoughtful decisions, children learning patience simply by waiting beside their parents. Hour after hour, nothing extraordinary needed to happen. Life itself was enough. Perhaps that is why these places endured for centuries. They answered needs deeper than buying and selling. They brought scattered lives together. They allowed strangers to become familiar faces. They carried stories farther than most people would ever travel themselves. They reminded everyone that survival was rarely achieved alone. It was built through cooperation, trust, routine, and quiet persistence. As the final wagon disappears beyond the town gate and the last merchant secures his workshop for the night, you allow yourself one final slow glance across the emptying square. The silence feels earned, not empty, simply peaceful after a long day of steady labor. If you have remained here from the first faint light before sunrise until this gentle evening, then you have experienced something that countless medieval people understood without ever needing to describe it. A market day was not remembered because of a single remarkable event. It was remembered because hundreds of ordinary moments flowed together so naturally that they became one complete rhythm, a rhythm of work, of waiting, of conversation, of careful choices, of tired feet, of honest trade, of familiar faces, of roads leading home beneath the evening sky. And now, as the last traces of daylight fade behind the rooftops and the quiet town prepares for another peaceful night, you leave the marketplace just as everyone else has, not with excitement, not with spectacle, but with the comforting feeling of having shared, for one long unhurried day, the simple heartbeat of everyday medieval life. Now the marketplace has become quiet enough that you can hear your own footsteps again. The lively murmur that accompanied you throughout the day has faded into the distance, replaced by the softer sounds of evening settling gently over the town. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, a church bell marks another passing hour. Its familiar tone lingers briefly in the cool air before disappearing into the growing stillness. You begin walking away from the square at the same patient pace that carried you through every hour of this long day. There is no reason to hurry. There rarely was. The narrow streets leading away from the marketplace are calmer now than they were this morning. Doors stand half open as warm firelight spills gently onto the worn stones outside. Families have returned home carrying baskets that are lighter than they were before sunrise, though their hearts may feel a little fuller after seeing familiar faces. sharing quiet conversations, and completing another week's necessary work. The smell of evening meals drifts softly through the town, fresh bread warming beside the fire, a simple stew slowly bubbling inside an iron pot, wood smoke curling upward into the darkening sky. These comforting scents replace the busy mixture of leather, herbs, livestock, spices, and fresh vegetables that filled the marketplace only a short while ago. The town itself seems to exhale. Windows glow like small stars beneath timber roofs. Lanterns appear one by one beside doorways. Voices become quieter. Even the animals seem content to rest after their own long day. You pause once before leaving the square entirely. Looking back, it is difficult to imagine that hundreds of people filled this same space only hours earlier. Where merchants once displayed bread, cloth, pottery, tools, candles, herbs, baskets, and spices, there is now little more than open cobblestone beneath the fading light. A few scattered pieces of straw remain. Tiny wheel marks still cross the dust. The faint scent of smoke lingers in the cool evening air. These small traces are all that remain of a day built from thousands of ordinary moments. Tomorrow morning, someone walking through this empty square might never guess what happened here today. The market leaves surprisingly little behind. Perhaps that is fitting. Its true purpose was never to leave lasting marks upon the stones. Its purpose was to sustain the people who walked across them. As you continue your slow journey through the quiet streets, you begin thinking about the countless market days that came before this one. Generations of bakers rose before dawn to knead bread, while the rest of the town still slept. Generations of blacksmiths stood beside glowing forges, shaping iron with patient hands. Farmers harvested grain, gathered vegetables, tended animals, and loaded wagons beneath stars long before sunrise. Potters shaped clay. Weavers prepared cloth. Coopers assembled barrels. Herbalists gathered plants. Children followed parents through familiar crowds, slowly learning the same routines they would one day perform themselves. Most of those people left behind no written records, no portraits, no famous speeches. History rarely remembered their names. Yet history could never have continued without them. Kings relied upon markets. Castles relied upon markets. Monasteries relied upon markets. Every ordinary household depended upon the steady rhythm you have quietly witnessed today. The true foundation of medieval life was not built only by rulers or warriors. It was built by patient workers who measured grain honestly, repaired worn tools, counted carefully saved coins, and greeted another customer with quiet respect. Their work was humble. Its importance was enormous. Perhaps that is one of the greatest surprises hidden within an ordinary market day. It reminds you that most human history has never been dramatic. Most people who have ever lived spent their lives solving familiar problems, preparing meals, mending clothing, carrying water, walking dusty roads, sharing news, helping neighbors, waiting patiently for tomorrow. Those ordinary moments rarely appear in history books, yet together they formed nearly every day humanity has ever known. The stars began appearing above the rooftops. One after another, they quietly replaced the daylight that guided the market from dawn until evening. The same stars watched merchants centuries ago. The same constellations stretched above wagons rolling slowly home along country roads. The same moon illuminated tired travelers carrying baskets filled with bread, vegetables, tools, cloth, and hope for another week ahead. Some things change remarkably little. Human hands continue working. Families continue gathering around evening meals. Communities continue depending upon one another. The details change. The rhythm remains familiar. Perhaps, without realizing it, you recognized pieces of your own life throughout this journey. Not the clothing, not the buildings, not the tools, but the quieter parts, the satisfaction of completing necessary work, the comfort of familiar routines, the relief of returning home after a long day, the simple pleasure of seeing familiar faces, the patient understanding that tomorrow will bring another list of ordinary tasks waiting to be completed. Across centuries, those feelings remain surprisingly unchanged. As you leave the town behind, the roads become peaceful once again. The last wagon has already disappeared into the countryside. Only faint wheel tracks remain pressed into the earth. The evening breeze carries the smell of grass cooling beneath the night sky. Somewhere far away, an owl begins its nightly call. The countryside settles into silence. You imagine the merchants now resting beside warm hearths, the baker preparing flour for tomorrow's bread, the blacksmith placing another piece of iron beside the forge before sleeping, the herbalist hanging fresh bundles to dry, the cooper examining tomorrow's work before finally allowing tired hands to rest. Even now, while the market sleeps, tomorrow quietly prepares itself. Life never truly stops, it simply changes pace. That gentle rhythm may be the greatest lesson this ordinary day has offered. A busy medieval market was never defined by constant excitement. It was defined by steady purpose, by people accepting that meaningful lives are built through countless modest actions, repeated with patience and care. One loaf baked, one basket woven, one shoe repaired, one honest bargain completed, one conversation shared, one journey home beneath the evening sky, again, and again, and again, and again, until those ordinary days became an entire lifetime. As your own footsteps grow slower, you allow the quiet of the evening to settle comfortably around you. The market is behind you now. The town is becoming little more than a handful of warm lights glowing gently in the distance. Soon even those lights disappear beyond the darkness. Only the memory remains, a memory not of grand events, but of simple human lives unfolding exactly as they had for generations. If this long, peaceful journey through an ordinary medieval market has helped your thoughts slow and your mind grow quieter, then the day has offered you one final gift. Thank you for spending these gentle hours with Sleepy Historian. If you found comfort in wandering through the quiet corners of the past, you are always welcome to return whenever you need another peaceful journey through history. Until then, may your evening be calm, your thoughts grow lighter, and your rest come as naturally as night settling over a medieval town after another long, honest day. Good night.